What is more menacing than Paul Heyman with a microphone? A young Heyman with a microphone. It's no news that the 58-year-old legendary manager is one of the greatest names in professional wrestling, and he was inducted into the Hall of Fame earlier this year. In a recent episode of Grilling JR, legendary commentator Jim Ross stated that the longest-reigning AEW World Champion, Maxwell Jacob Friedman, reminded him of a young Paul Heyman. MJF possesses exceptional promo-cutting skills, has great on-screen presence, and immense charisma. These were possibly the qualities Ross saw in the 28-year-old to compare him to the legendary Hall of Famer. He, MJF, reminds me of a young Paul Heyman. They're both students of the game. And I think Max is a keeper. Obviously, that's an understatement. So, we will see where it all ends up, said Ross. From 37:30 to 37:45, even though MJF reminded Jim Ross of a young Paul Heyman, he was underwhelmed with his recent booking. Maxwell Jacob faced off against CMLL star Hechicero at the recently concluded Forbidden Door pay-per-view, with MJF picking up the victory by pinfall. Speaking on the same episode of Grilling JR, Jim Ross revealed that he was not very pleased with MJF's booking at Forbidden Door recently. However, he believes that the AEW star is extremely talented and was glad that the 28-year-old was part of the company's roster. Additionally, the 72-year-old said that he was happy to see how the AEW star's career had progressed and was glad that the dedication the youngster had towards his craft. I was somewhat underwhelmed with his booking on Sunday. Not the fact that he worked first. That is irrelevant to me. As a matter of fact, you get a break by working first because the audience is fresh. So it's all good. And I'm a fan of his. He's just like any other young guy. He's just gotta mature, said Ross. From 34:35:35:07, MJF turned heel on the latest episode of Dynamite by attacking Daniel Garcia after the latter's match against Will Ospreay. Furthermore, the 28-year-old announced on X, formerly Twitter, that he will kick off the upcoming episode of AEW Collision, which will take place on Saturday, July 6th, in South Haven, Mississippi. Jim Ross declares major AEW star reminds him of a young Paul Heyman. Jim Ross sat back in his chair, his eyes narrowing thoughtfully as he took in the scene before him. The bustling backstage area of All Elite Wrestling was a whirlwind of activity, wrestlers preparing for their matches, staff coordinating the production, and the ever-present hum of anticipation that filled the air. But amidst the chaos, one individual stood out to the seasoned commentator, a young man who seemed to exude a magnetic energy, capturing the attention of everyone around him. Ross, a legend in the world of professional wrestling commentary, had seen countless talents come and go throughout his storied career. Yet, this young AEW star struck a chord with him in a way that few had before. As he watched the young man interact with his peers, orchestrate plans, and exude an undeniable charisma, Ross felt a familiar sense of déjà vu wash over him. It was during a brief lull in the chaos that Ross found himself sitting down with Tony Schiavone, his fellow commentator and longtime friend. The two of them shared a camaraderie that only years of shared experiences could forge. Ross leaned in, his voice low but filled with a sense of conviction. "Tony, you see that kid over there?" Ross nodded towards the young AEW star who was now in deep conversation with one of the producers. "He reminds me of a young Paul Heyman." Schiavone raised an eyebrow, following Ross's gaze. "You think so, JR? That's high praise coming from you." Ross nodded, his eyes never leaving the young man. "There's something about him. The way he carries himself, the way he commands attention. It's not just about his in-ring skills, though those are impressive. It's his mind for the business, his understanding of what makes a great story. It's like seeing Paul Heyman all over again, back when he was starting out." The young star in question was Maxwell Jacob Friedman, better known to wrestling fans as MJF. Known for his razor-sharp wit, unparalleled promo skills, and an innate ability to generate heat from the crowd, MJF had quickly become one of the most talked-about figures in AEW. But beyond his brash exterior and heel persona, there was a shrewdness to MJF that set him apart. Ross had seen it before, years ago, in a young Paul Heyman. Heyman had burst onto the wrestling scene with an innovative vision and a relentless drive, eventually becoming one of the most influential figures in the industry. His ability to craft compelling narratives and elevate talent was unmatched, and Ross saw that same potential in MJF. As the evening wore on, Ross's conviction only grew stronger. He watched MJF navigate the backstage environment with a blend of confidence and cunning that belied his years. The young star's ability to read a room, to understand the nuances of the business, and to manipulate situations to his advantage was nothing short of remarkable. During a break in the action, Ross approached MJF, who was now reviewing his upcoming promo with a member of the creative team. The young star looked up, a smirk playing on his lips as he acknowledged the legendary commentator. "Mr. Ross," MJF greeted him with a nod, his tone respectful but tinged with his trademark arrogance. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" Ross smiled, appreciating the bravado. "I just wanted to have a word with you, kid. You've got something special, you know that?" MJF's smirk widened. "I appreciate the compliment, but I already knew that." Ross chuckled, shaking his head. "You remind me of someone I used to know. A young Paul Heyman. He had that same fire, that same drive. And look where it took him." MJF's eyes gleamed with interest. "Paul Heyman, huh? High praise coming from you, JR. What's your point?" "My point," Ross said, his voice steady, "is that you've got the potential to be one of the greats. Not just in the ring, but beyond it. You've got a mind for this business, and if you play your cards right, you could leave a legacy just like Heyman did." For a moment, MJF's cocky facade slipped, replaced by a look of genuine contemplation. Ross could see the wheels turning in the young man's mind, and he knew his words had struck a chord. "I appreciate that, Mr. Ross," MJF said finally, his tone sincere. "I'll keep that in mind." As Ross walked away, he couldn't help but feel a sense of excitement. The wrestling business was always evolving, always changing, but seeing a young talent like MJF reminded him that the future was in good hands. Just as Paul Heyman had once revolutionized the industry with his vision and ingenuity, perhaps MJF would do the same in his own unique way. In the weeks that followed, Ross's words continued to resonate with MJF. The young star threw himself into his work with renewed vigor, pushing the boundaries of his character and honing his craft. He began to take a more active role behind the scenes, contributing ideas and collaborating with the creative team to shape the narratives that captivated the audience. And just as Ross had predicted, MJF's star continued to rise. His promos became even sharper, his in-ring performances more compelling, and his influence within AEW grew. The comparisons to Paul Heyman became more frequent, and MJF embraced them, understanding the weight of the legacy he was building. Jim Ross watched it all unfold with a sense of pride and satisfaction. He had seen the potential in MJF, and he knew that the young star was destined for greatness. In a world where the landscape of professional wrestling was constantly shifting, it was talents like MJF who would carry the torch forward, blazing new trails and leaving an indelible mark on the industry. As Ross settled into his chair at the commentary table, ready to call the night's action, he couldn't help but smile. The future was bright, and the echoes of a young Paul Heyman were alive and well in the form of Maxwell Jacob Friedman.